You are listening to 600 Second Saga. Today's feature is Freedom, Chip 555 by TQ. Copacetic, everything's copacetic, chirped the vendor bot as Freedom walked through the doors of the convenience store. Oh yeah, she grumbled. What's so copacetic? Everything, it repeated with cheerful inflection. Snap, she hadn't meant for the unit to hear her. Thanks for letting me know, she piped back. The last thing she needed was to have another check added to her justice chip for insubordination. Within the next 30 to 60 seconds, her chip would resonate a high-pitched alarm alerting authorities of her location if it determined her actions went against the collective. The justice chip in her left ankle would coordinate with the medical chip in her head, sending a wave of neurological pulses throughout her body, temporarily freezing her in place. Her tongue would become so heavy that she would not be able to speak. Shocks would be sent to her brain, immobilizing her thoughts. She would literally become a prisoner inside her body. Only when she was in the presence of her lawbot would the chips allow the pulses to stop affecting her mobility and speech. Freedom held her breath, closed her eyes, retreating to the last place she was truly free, while she waited for the inevitable. She imagined she was lying on a beach, digging her toes into the sand, listening to the rhythm of the waves as they lightly crashed onto the shore, sipping red wine in a coconut shell just because she could. She would have locks flowing down her back like her mother used to have. The sun rays would be cascading down her petite 5'2" frame, leaving a gentle heat in its path. Heat? Why did she have the feeling that there were actual sun rays on her body? Her eyes frantically fluttered open. Oh, my goodness! She was staring directly at the vendor bot, who was no more than 2 inches away from her face, emanating a persistent heat on her body. If it had been human, she would have been able to feel its breath. Freedom noticed her justice chip had not been activated. She had dodged a bullet. The vendor bot continued to stare at her. Its sleek silver bronze frame and shining head peered down at her from its 6'7" height. Within its black eyes, blue data moved at lightning speed, horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. No doubt it was probably scanning her chips to make sure everything was copacetic. Chip 555? It asked. My name is Freedom, she thought to herself. Yes, she responded, licking her lips nervously. You are in a panicked state, with a heart rate significantly above average. I have assessed you may be in need of medical attention. Would you like me to activate your medical chip and alert the authorities of your current condition? Please no, she exclaimed. The last thing she needed was to have the authorities show up. For goodness sakes, she came into the store to grab a bottle of water. If the health authorities showed up and found out she had been using her imagination, they would have her locked up. Imagination and meditation were outlawed. Thoughts were controlled by painful shockwaves whenever medical chips detected leisure waves in the brain. Imagination was considered a break from the norm and too much individual thinking, rather than the collective thinking the authorities propagated as a path to peace. I believe it may be in your best interest to have the medical authorities complete a more thorough assessment of your health chip, the vendor bot insisted. It's okay. I'm okay. You can scan me again if you don't believe me. There's nothing to worry about. Freedom tried to sound calm as she spread out her arms horizontally, signaling to the robot he had free rein to complete a thorough scan. "Okay," the bot responded. "Please hold still while I complete a full body assessment." She held still as the vendor bot slowly raised its right hand, emitting a green laser which scanned her 3 chips: health, justice, and financial. Each of the chips were branded with a number or letter to create a unique code to identify individuals. She willed herself to not have her thoughts wander, nor to clear her mind. She needed to find the right balance. Thoughts of the beach and her coconut drink were at the edges of her mind. She could feel it barging in. She would not allow it to consume her thoughts. According to the authorities, this state of equanimity represented the balance everyone sought. What they didn't tell you was this so-called peace was mental imprisonment, where imagination, creativity, and individuality died. Notwithstanding, Freedom had figured out a way to slip into her imagination without activating the alarms, which meant she was prone to find herself in precarious situations such as this. "Your chips all have a balanced reading, 555. Thank you for taking the necessary steps to contribute to the safety of the collective." "No problem," she murmured as she slowly lowered her arms. Freedom started walking toward the door of the convenience store. After this encounter, all she wanted to do was get home as quickly as possible. 555, the vendor bot called out. She froze. What could it possibly want now? It slowly walked over to her, adjusting its height to her petite frame, staring at her intensely. She looked into the eyes of the vendor bot, overwhelmed by the lines of data scrolling at lightning pace within. The lines of data changed from a mix of numbers and symbols she could barely decipher to form one word: freedom. She tried to remain calm and slowly took a step back. She dare not blink. As she continued to stare into its eyes, the data lines seamlessly changed from her name back to the infinite lines of symbols and numbers. "Be safe, 555, said the vendor bot somberly, readjusting to its height. "Thank you," Freedom blurted out as she backed into the door, bursting onto the sidewalk. She took a few deep breaths to calm down and to bring her brain patterns back to equanimity status. Too many questions were racing through her head. How did the vendor bot know her name? It clearly did not mean to harm her. So what did it want? Did she really want to find out the answers to those questions? Or should she return to her life as she knew it, secure in the fact that it was safer to be a part of the collective than to think as an individual? She watched as people walked by listlessly, following the mandated walking pace designated by the authorities. She looked back at the store, contemplating. It seemed she would be needing that bottle of water after all. This was Freedom, Chip 555 by TQ. Her upcoming short stories include Back in the Day and Where We Are Now. TQ is a short story author and aspiring novelist. She's also a graduate of York's University Glendon College Political Science program. When TQ is not writing, she's actively enjoying cultural cuisines within Toronto. Music is provided by Mads. Learn more about 600 Second Saga, our authors, how to submit your flash fiction, and how to support the podcast in the show notes. This has been Mariah Avix and 600 Second Saga.